Okay, yours on? All right, welcome everyone. I'm Eric Pearson. I'm the Director of Curriculum here at Austin Classical Guitar, and I'm here with my colleague, Jeremy Osbourne. And we are here to continue our new series of GuitarCurriculum.com live events. And what we're hoping to accomplish with this, so if they haven't joined us before, is kind of twofold. One of the things is that I think there's an opportunity to meet and talk with other guitarists and guitar directors that are teaching classroom guitar around the country and share our best practices, resources, approaches, different things we've learned. And then also, I think just letting everyone else know that they're not on an island. So I think so frequently as classroom guitar teachers, we are fairly isolated. We don't have the professional institutions and networking opportunities that maybe choir, orchestra, band directors normally have. And so we're hoping to maybe meet some folks that are in different regions of the country and help with that. And also just kind of share the things that we use here in Austin, Texas, and also around the country. And along with that, we have a friend here, Chuck Houlihan, who I'm going to bring up for a second here. And Chuck, can we hear you okay over there?
Hello. How are you guys? It's great to join you.
Absolutely.
Great.
And so I've kind of worked with Chuck a couple times in different parts of the country at Guitar Foundation of America events, and I know he's doing some great stuff where he's at now. Chuck, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're teaching right now and the things that you've done with directing guitar ensembles?
Sure, of course. I'm always more than happy to gab a little bit about my duties. I was just thinking, Eric, I think I believe you and I first met actually at the GED conference. I want to say it was your presentation for guitar curriculum in Nashville, Tennessee, at one of the National Association for Music Ed conferences.
That's right.
And then most recently, I was excited to be there with you guys just this last August for the teacher training summit. That was a fabulous time. For everyone here joining us, I'm someone who's currently using the guitar curriculum and a fan of guitar curriculum, and very much someone who has been able to see the many benefits of having a resource such as that. And I've gotten myself, I guess, a bit more involved each year, and it culminated with that visit out to Austin in that great hangout with, what were there, about 70 plus
70, 80 usually
folks in attendance. That was great. So to actually answer the question, I'm in Glendale, Arizona, which is Greater Phoenix, metropolitan Phoenix, and I've taught at Glendale Community College now actually since 1999. So I'll be pushing 20 years there. Have a really fabulous gig with an amazing studio of really and superbly hardworking students. We've got just over 20 guitars, many of which are pursuing music education, and definitely one of our features, or certainly an area of focus that has, I think, grown out of my love for guitar ensemble is a lot of ensemble activity, a lot of performing with a lot of new music, a lot of premieres by guitar ensemble composers, guest artists, and just an awful lot of, I guess, act would be the best description. But blessed to have a great gig where I'm able to interact with musicians of really a variety of backgrounds and levels that they come to me at the community college. So it really helps me kind of keep my finger on the pulse of where the guitar is, where guitar education is, and really definitely not someone who spends much time on a desert island. I love the networks and firmly believe in having a really strong network, and proud to be part of this network, and happy to be here with you tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to just do a kind of a quick intro of my colleague here, Jeremy Osbourne. And so I'm the kind of the newer guy to our crew here in Austin. This is my 8th year. I came in 2011. And so they had already established, dozens of guitar programs in middle and high schools by the time I got here. And I've been here to see that grow even more. But Jeremy was pretty close to the ground level. I know he came back after they started, and has been involved in some really interesting stuff. And I think the topic that we heard some feedback from folks online at our last event last month, and then also I got a call yesterday from someone, was the interest in advocacy and kind of, how do you advocate to the different people in your community, different constituents of, whether you're in the public school or if you're in a private studio or a guitar society that's trying to build some kind of guitar programs, was the question of, what are some things, some ideas, some challenges in advocating for guitar, specifically, classroom guitar. And then, I think Jeremy has some unique perspectives. So I don't know, maybe talk about a little bit of history.
Yeah,
here.
So I came on board with Austin Classical Guitar in 2008. And by the time when I got here, we had just had two really well-established programs in Austin. And Matt Hensley and Travis Markham had already laid some pretty good groundwork, and then they were just at a point where there was just too much work to do, and they needed to get somebody else on board to help out with the education stuff. And they called me up, and I came over as soon as I could. And from then on, I was kind of one of the main boots on the ground for all of the development that we've been doing throughout Austin. I used to tell people I did a 90-mile loop around Austin every day, just going to various schools and either mentor teaching with a new guitar teacher, or actually teaching the class myself. Basically, just trying to fill in any gaps that we needed to help build these programs and have them thrive. So now we're just about every middle and high school in Austin ISD. That 90-mile loop has gotten smaller over the years, so I've been able to. I couldn't even make that route anymore with the way traffic is in Austin. But yeah, there's I've seen a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't. But when we're talking about advocacy, I think there's no one approach that works in any sort of community, because we're all coming from different places and different things work.
One thing I find, we get folks from different parts of the country that are starting. We've got kind of growing zones of guitar activity in, obviously Las Vegas, Loudon, Virginia. We got folks up in Ohio, St. Louis, California. So there's all these little hot spots, and one thing that I hear a lot is people trying to look for, what's the magic, solution? What's the one answer? And the only generality I can say is the things that have worked for us and the people that we work through, dozens of folks around the country, is kind of grassroots advocacy versus this big institutional thing where we could, the school district, kind of dubs this new program fully funded and is in every school on the campus. Like, that doesn't seem to happen. We're kind of in that unique position as guitarists, having to kind of strive and advocate from wherever we're at and build it piece by piece. But I think in a lot of ways that lets us grow and learn and figure out what works in the different communities. And so, I think it's really been a benefit, because we've been able to try things out and grow and change the approaches and the curriculum and the materials. I mean, the guitar curriculum came from that process. It was us trying to figure out what works when the solo method books or the kind of materials that you develop as a private one-on-one teacher don't really map to a classroom of 30 students. And you're always going to have, if you do that, you're teaching a private lesson to 30 students in one classroom. And so our approach developed into, how do we get everyone engaged more of the time, playing, making music together, and then cut down the time of, spent doing work up towards making music. Let's try to make music immediately and then build upon that. And so I think that kind of philosophy in teaching also applies to how we're going to build in small increments and small variations in relationships with schools, parents, administrators, different parts of the community, and then let those little successes kind of spread to the next person that hears about it. It's like, oh, and so maybe talk about, like, I know there was a couple of core programs before I was here that kind of spread, that when they try them out and there's a pilot or whatever.
Yeah, so we had the McCallum Fine Arts Academy, and then the feeder into that program was the Lamar Fine Arts Academy. And those of you that are in the classroom guitar education world probably have seen a video or heard something from McCallum at some point. They're pretty spectacular. As soon as we had a couple of these programs have some success and real awesome music making, we used our platform and with Austin Classical Guitar to put them in front of audiences before our international concert series. But we also used kind of our collective brains to just find different performance venues throughout the community where we could showcase what they were doing and just drive up more word of mouth of how amazing this guitar orchestra was. And I think some pretty crucial people in the district took notice of what was happening. At that time, we had a principal who's kind of a wizard in the district. He's known for a while he used to train all of the data processors and throughout the district, and he was not a musician or artist himself, but really was a huge advocate for it. And he was adamant about making the guitar program at one of his schools be one of the best, because he was an assistant principal at McCallum for a while, and then he moved over to Lamar Middle School, which at the time was a failing school. And he saw what the guitar program was pulling in a kid that wasn't going to take band, orchestra, or choir. It would still get some of those kids, but the majority of the kids in that class wouldn't have taken any of those other offerings. So he was adamant when he took over at the middle school, which is the feeder to McCallum, and he wanted to have the best middle school guitar program in the country. That was his goal. He was already pretty much bought in.
So I think, just to kind of recap, two of the big points that Jeremy mentioned there was, one was that relationship with an administrator who saw that good work happening at maybe their former school and was kind of sold, like, oh, that's awesome. I want us to be, have this kind of feather in the cap of a really awesome program at my school. And we see that in Texas a lot. As a school sees success in maybe their neighbor's school, maybe their competing football team school, and wants to adopt that program. And then the other part was that principal has told us several times and kind of advocated for us at fundraisers and meetings and stuff. Was he said his guitar classroom is the only arts program that looks like the demographics of his students. So it really brings in a wide variety of diverse students. When some of those other arts programs historically weren't doing that. And the reports we've seen, and sometimes we get some numbers of, it's talking about like advocating for guitar, is we're really not taking students out of an already existing arts or performance class. In at least in our cases, it's creating an opportunity for kids that weren't normally going to be participating in a music class to go into a really unique thing that speaks to them. So it just brings more of your student population into the fine arts building. And maybe before we go into some other ones, Chuck, do you have any similar experiences or kind of response to that?
Yeah, no, like freakishly similar, because I think really everything we're talking about here that particularly pertains to growth, whether it's growth of programs, starting a program, building a program, even growth in terms of refining a program. I think what comes in hand with that. Two of the topics that we're talking about here are this idea of a networking and certainly advocacy. And I think at least with advocacy, that also falls under the category of most of us had no idea we were advocates when we became musicians or music teachers. But you wake up one day and you really have that check that part of the gig is absolutely advocating for your art form, for the intrinsic value of what we're doing, and advocacy really leads to aspects of your career that you didn't necessarily know you were going to be dealing with, and certainly having amazing relationships with all of your colleagues, directly having a strong network. And in my case, in my early career in high school, teaching at the high school level, I very much relied on the orchestra, band, and choir director. They had all the experience, in the classroom. So I absolutely built a very strong, small local network at every step in my career there, and certainly at the community college where I've been now. It's always about having a rather large and very strong profile for your program. The administrators have that. There's this quality program that's right under their nose. Arts are the easiest things to promote, to market for a school. So absolutely, I've been fortunate to have really strong relationships with all of my college presidents, and with for our district chancellor, and I can only say they're all very, very strong supporters and fans of our guitar program. And because of hard work to advocate by taking the classroom really to the stakeholders, meaning the performers out of the class, and whether it's going and performing for the governing board or perform an event, really focus becomes performing, and then educating and very much advocating for the value of what's going on in your classroom. At the same time, the network, making sure that what you are promoting and what you are bringing out and advocating is quality. You certainly, when you have the eyes and ears of important stakeholders, you want to make sure they're really getting wowed. So yeah, I absolutely agree with these points, and these are really strong parts of my professional life, and something that I promote with all my students and colleagues. We absolutely have to wave our own flags. We absolutely have to be our own advocates. We absolutely have to fully engage and spend time understanding of all of the issues that are there in regards to advocacy for music education.
Yeah. One thing I heard you mention a couple of times there, and I think is an important theme, is performance. The authentic experience of this artwork, and that is, it makes it a little easier because the results of what we're doing are intended for our community members, our audience members. So, we have to be very cautious and very proactive to make sure we are not forgetting that, we should be inviting people to everything we're doing, finding ways to communicate, whether that's through video or inviting people to events or collaborating with other things. Some of the middle schools here have found really cool ways of doing kind of smaller, shorter performances more often, rather than waiting for that big one at the end of the year. It's like, no, we're going to play for the coffee hour with the parents and the principal, twice a month. We're going to play at the library for a younger grades reading event, just a way to go play one or two pieces. So having, more frequent artistic experiences, one for the students, is awesome. It's great practice for stage presence, but it also is an amazing vehicle for advocating and, communicating what you're doing. And I really like that kind of intrinsic, value of saying, this is what we're doing, this is the activity, rather than, maybe explaining it in email or written form or putting some descriptions of it. It's like, we're lucky, I guess, in the music world and the art world, is that we can share the actual product of that work directly, and kind of, show that.
Yeah. Well, I think just for the sake of getting as much information out as we can, I think, we have a couple bullet points that we were looking at. I just want to make sure that we kind of fire through a few of them, but because all three of us have probably some very specific ideas towards some of these things, but I'd like to start with kind of the low-hanging fruit of all of this. And I want to start with this just because I feel like it's actually the least effective part of advocacy, but I think it's still something worth talking about. And I think it's also something that people get really hung up on, and that's the financial side of that conversation. And it's a great strength of a guitar class, and we often say like you can outfit an entire classroom full of guitars for the price of one tuba. So when you're looking at like a equity of educational opportunity, it really has a low entry point as far as that goes. And we've had a lot of like charter schools that needed to offer some sort of fine arts offerings so they could be in compliance with the state of Texas. And they'd come to us for suggestions, and we said, oh, we definitely have your solution there. And the same thing with what I'll probably talk a little bit more about later, our program in the juvenile justice system. Prior to, there's an AISD school inside of there, and prior to our program, the only way for those kids to earn their fine arts credit was literally a art program that was on a computer, much like a credit recovery course. So, that's always it's always going to be a strong talking point, but I think is not necessarily the most like impactful. It's definitely something that looks good on a piece of paper with a proposal when you're handing that to administrator, because they probably have to.
Yeah. Well, I think your audience matters, right? Like there's a whole kind of I want to say menu of different messages and different people that message is most appropriate for in the right time. And so I think there is times when it's just the reality. I mean, Texas and Austin in particular is dealing with some serious realities about budgeting right now, about schools possibly closing. And so it's a real part of discussions when they're talking about whether or not a fine arts program or music program will even exist at a school. And so being able to be the person at the table that says, hey, we can do a wonderful performing program, and here's the cost, unfortunately might be the reality of discussions. And I know there's classes and schools we've worked with around the country that's the case. There's no way we're going to be able to afford, program X because the cost of instruments and all these other things. But we can get whatever, $100 guitar package per student and be making beautiful music. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. Maybe think of some of the other, who are the other constituents or audience members in our communities, other than, we have administrators, people that have to look at the numbers. But.
Well, and then actual teachers too. Yeah. I think, and that's how a lot of our programs started too. We actually worked from the teacher and then worked our way up from there. We're only now, like in the last 4 or 5 years, that we're actually we'll be talking about administrators and even like school board members and things like that. But we worked our way from the ground all the way up to that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting advocacy point. It's like, one is just talking about the possibility of the option of guitar as a school-based classroom instrument. And it's 2-1 guitar educators, which is something we need to work on, that pipeline of teacher preparation. And then 2, to choir, orchestra, band teachers, who a lot of times we get the questions like, oh, well, I'm not a guitarist, I don't have a guitar degree, how could I teach it? I was like, well, actually, the skills to play the instrument we can help you with, and you can gain, but your teaching and conducting and musicianship and all those things are actually incredibly valuable. And some of our greatest teachers and conductors of guitar ensembles were orchestra, band, choir folks that just kind of got bit by the guitar bug and said, oh, I'm going to really work at this, but you don't have to be a violinist to lead strings. You have wind players that lead orchestras, and the same thing as you don't necessarily have to be the world's best guitarist to be an incredible teacher and conductor of an ensemble.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, guys, I would to address the first point you made, Jeremy, with the kind of the low hanging fruit. I couldn't agree more. It's super convenient and it's great. It certainly doesn't hurt us. The cost of a guitar program on average, is significantly less than many programs. But yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that's not the value of it, and given an option, that's certainly not the main point of why you would want to start a guitar program. I think it's definitely on the shallow side. That said, maybe one of the greatest pitfalls that I've seen and being on some sides, kind of being on the administrative side a bit as well in my department, have to know what it is you want and be ready to roll when that opportunity does. Conversation with an administrator does happen in the moment, and they say, well, what are we talking? No, for $2,000, this and that, and could you get that to me in an email? Yep, it's sent.
Yeah, draft it.
Okay, and then it's done, as compared to the squeaking, I need money, and the program, send that stuff to me. I get together. I've been fortunate that I've seen examples in my many wonderful colleagues of how to be ready for when that moment does arise, that someone is in a position to kind of help you with some budgeting, and how that's not the time then. Figure out what it is you would need. So I'm thinking, I guess I'm thinking of places like Kalido Guitars, and how easy they can kind of make it for the classroom in terms of, setting you up with a really cool, here's how many guitars you need for the classroom, here's an approximate cost, and just having that on hand for when the opportunity does arise. Because yes, I think sometimes folks in addition of overseeing a budget are shocked at just how inexpensive you can set up a whole guitar program for. So I think it's important that, yes, that's not the greatest selling point or the one with the most depth or value, but it doesn't hurt us, and it's good to be ready to jump on it when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I think it's, to your point, I guess what you're describing is have a well-refined elevator pitch. And it has its place, and there is a time when you definitely need to be ready to talk about it. But I think, even myself, I've caught myself like talking about that too much.
Yeah, and I think that brings up, like I said, we have a list of things we want to make sure to touch base on. But I would be remiss if I didn't kind of talk about the thing that we talk about every week with Dr. Matthew Hensley, the director here, is that we need to always focus on inspiration. Not just information or not transactional stuff. It's why are we here? Why is this Guitar Society here? Why is this music class? Why is this arts program in the school? And it's not just to get someone a music job or, in my opinion, prepare them for a work or something. We believe this is a core part of the human experience, and the arts and music is something we need to make sure is a part of everyone's upbringing and education, for that lifelong learning and enjoyment and kind of self-actualization as a citizen. And so we need to understand the other pieces and have the details ready and all that. But any job I've applied for, or when we were doing student teaching, we had to write our philosophy of music education, which is basically the why are you here. And, we need to know that, because it's going to be hard. You're going to have a tough job, and life is not always going to be easy. And you're going to have to deal with stuff that's going to make you questions like, can I make it through this? Is this, going to pay off? And you have to have that core kind of belief is like, I'm here because I believe in this and I believe it's necessary. And it's not because it's cheaper to outfit a classroom with this thing. It's like, no, I really think this is beautiful human experience, and I have a need to share that with the students and the community and the parents and the members of of my community, and finding a way to communicate that. Like I said in the elevator pitch, it's inspiration, it's not information.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, and maybe to tie that into the other point you guys were making, that starting a guitar program is not going to drain the band class or steal kids away from the orchestra class. I mean, time and time again, it has clearly been shown to not have that impact at all, but have the impact of dramatically increasing the participation in music by having yet another vehicle, another medium, another type of classroom as an entry point for students. So being access is always at the core, and certainly when we talk about music as a core subject, we really all need to stay focused on finding ways to have music for everyone. And I think guitar provides an absolutely some alternative entry point if you will, into music.
Yeah, I got a couple kind of examples I think would be kind of fun to share, and maybe I'll give one, and maybe Chuck, you have one. But I think back of like, okay, who are the constituents of our community that we want to communicate to, and what's a really effective way to do that. When I first got here, we actually started an after-school program, and it's a little probably too much to say we started it. As a really active parent came to us because they maybe heard about one of our other schools, and we weren't currently in their middle school. And they said, hey, I want a guitar class. I want my son to be able to do what they did over at this middle school. Could you start a class? I was like, well, getting it sold to the district and getting a class made and the cost and all that, it's kind of tough to do. It takes a while to get it through all the bureaucracy stuff. But we could maybe do an after-school club. And so this parent went and rallied up 6-8 students and got them in touch with us. And we found, I think, 2 days a week. And so I started teaching a guitar club just because there were some passionate people that wanted to do it. And so they built, like I said, 8 students that first semester, and we taught that. And then we did a performance with the school. I think maybe it was with their choir in their regular concert. It's like, oh, and here's the guitar club. And it got tons of interest and students signing up. And so the next semester it went as a curricular class. And so that was an opportunity where a parent really spearheaded that activity. We were luckily able to help, as an outside organization. We're a nonprofit that kind of consults with the district. And so we had the flexibility to come in there mid-semester and say, all right, awesome, let's start a guitar club. We'll hand out some information. And that's one of our strongest programs, now. And it was just kind of an interesting experience of, we did this kind of non-standard thing, but we were really focused on performance. It was like, we're going to go do several performances and get these students playing, not only for their parents and the teachers, but also for other prospective members. So they played at the choir or whatever, recital. And then other students were like, hey, wait, cool, guitar. I didn't know that was an option. And so now they're asking the choir teacher. And, we've had several of those stories in Austin where those have become full-time guitar positions after a couple semesters, couple years of that type of, performance-based advocacy. And a lot of teachers will actually find ways to go and play at their feeder schools. So if you're a high school, you will go and do performances, outreach concerts at your middle schools because it's just the best recruitment, for years. And maybe Chuck, you're in the land of recruitment, so maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I guess in Phoenix, in Greater Phoenix, and maybe even more broadly in Arizona, we and this all kind of ties in together to several of the themes we're discussing. But we have 3 guitar societies. We have one 2 hours north, Grand Canyon Guitar Society, 2 hours south, Tucson Guitar Society. Both have really active programs, bring amazing artists through our state, do great outreach things, education programs. And then in recent years, really someone who's been part of our Glendale Community College guitar for a decade or more now, and an adult student of mine, Bill Bayless, started our Phoenix Guitar Society. So we kind of completed a little stitching of the state. And also simultaneous to this, over my career, the last 2 decades, I've had the pleasure of kind of watching the guitars pop up around both metropolitan Phoenix and across the state of Arizona. Much of it due to the fact that there were now either stronger programs at charter schools that didn't require state certification, or private schools, or in the case of schools, finally having some alternative paths to certification. The major colleges and universities that were degree granting and have music education programs finally kind of unlocking the gates to guitarists, if you will. And then through that time, I've kind of watched the paradigm really shift, and we have a number of full-time guitar teachers. I'm happy and proud to say a number of them have been former mine that are now at the high schools in my area, and because of that, I enjoy really great relationships with a large network of high school students. And this ties into our guitar societies because we all just do a lot of programming together. We share, we coordinate on events. The guitar societies essentially provide resources and opportunities for the school programs. The school programs themselves coordinate on events, much like I know goes on all over Austin and Texas and so many of the other guitar hubs, whether it's citywide performances, district or regional ensembles. So I think that networking aspect really plays an important role into all this.
Yeah, I want to come back and talk about teacher preparation, because you mentioned certification programs and stuff. And I actually got a question about that from a student down in San Marcos, but that's going to take a while. So let me say that one for a little bit later. But I do want to go back to, you mentioned the guitar society angle, our place as a guitar society here in Austin, and you're involved in there. And I think one of the really key things that has helped us be successful is not that we're just a concert presenter entity, or we're not just a program that goes into schools. It's that we've been lucky enough to develop the ability to have our kind of artistic endeavors, building concerts, doing events, as well as our work in the schools. And then kind of our third category, and we struggle to find the right label for it, is what we're calling our pro-social ecosystem of really unique, interesting programming. An example would be, working with mothers, writing lullabies for them and their newborn children or babies they're about to have. Programs in the juvenile justice system that Jeremy's been working with. Finding really interesting communities and finding out a way that we can use what we know with our connections and our experiences to connect with where they're at. And so, we've had to step out of our mold and do things that don't look like maybe what traditional classical guitar or even guitar looks like. We have concerts that's like, well, that's interesting. I mean, that's not what I expect going to the Classical Guitar Society event. It's like you've got a chamber ensemble with guitar and percussion and singers, and you've got spoken word. And we just did a thing with Kazuhito Yamashita with artwork showing Goya's Caprichos. And so finding interesting ways to both step out of our comfort zone artistically, kind of educationally, what is a different way to try things, different approach, different, is it in public schools, is it after school programming, and then, something totally out of the box. Can we, we did a class for the movie Coco, the Pixar film came out, and we taught 90 kids how to play the theme song to that before they went and watched the movie when it premiered at one of our local theaters. And so it was just an opportunity. We said, we could have just easily said, oh, that's too hard and weird, and we weren't going to do it. But we said, no, we're going to buckle down. We'll go find 90 guitars, arrange this thing, and then, have a bunch of people shipping them there to the theater was a challenge in itself. But those all connect, and that is, I think, has been part of our success, as an organization, is being able to bring people together that normally wouldn't be in the same ecosystem. We have students coming to see the world's finest guitarists. We have students opening for every single concert whenever possible. So there's a student opening for Pepe Romero, student opening for, great flamencos, Nino de Pura, and having an awesome experience. When would you get that opportunity otherwise? And then, performers, you mentioned doing outreach concerts in Austin. We have 30 to 50 artists go out and play and engage with students in their classrooms. I know Grisha Goryachev, the flamenco guy, loves to go out in the schools. So like he'll find a week where he can go to a bunch of schools before his concerts whenever he's here. And there's a lot of the artists really, really enjoy doing that and have an awesome perspective to offer and enrich that, experience. And so there's lots of really cool ideas, and talking to folks like you and others around the country to ask, it's like, hey, who likes doing that? Who's good at that? And it's like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, I think Pepe Romero did a residency for us for a week last year. He did a concerto, did a Vivaldi concerto with our student guitarists. He went to the School for the Blind here in Austin and worked with them, and just really had an awesome time with them. And so, just talking to people and hearing what resources are out there, what artists.
Which, if anybody's interested, we have like the video of that on our YouTube page. So it's really cool to check out.
And as we brought it up, making music reach people where they're at. So we launched a website this year called letsplayguitar.org. And that is a series of a lot of pieces we've developed and new solos in Braille for students, that are without sight. And so that resource that we've made available freely was just a response of us working with the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and talking to people that said, is there a way to get this out to schools and students that can't come to Austin, because they come here for a period of time and learn some skills and then go back to their home schools. And that's actually the similar story in all 50 states. And so Texas is actually a center for these resources. And so we developed that just out of being open to a conversation and stepping out of our comfort zone, saying, all right, let's see if we can make a resource that'll help and make accommodations and talk to a specialist that does that. And then that, we got a response within a week of a gentleman from South Africa who said, yeah, I couldn't find a teacher that could work with me here where I'm at. And this has been great. I've been learning for 3 weeks, and he played a piece for us. And so it's just all these cool stories and opportunities. But, it's really comes down to that philosophy of just being really open to how do we connect all the people that are around us in our community and use, music to be that catalyst.
I think one thing I'd like to kind of push the conversation towards now is that, and Chuck mentioned it, and I think this is probably one of the two most powerful things that I think you need to get used to doing if you want to advocate for these sort of programs, and that's performance. Like performing as often, as many places as you possibly can, and perform well. And I think a lot of, especially a lot of early classroom teachers are really self-conscious about the idea of performing because they feel like it's kind of like an evaluation of what they do. But I think if you can, one, you should, if you want to do these sorts of things, you should be jazzed up about having your kids perform all the time. Yeah. Chuck, I know you probably do a lot with your college groups, but I mean, do you have? We'll just hand it over to you to talk about finding some different variations of performance experiences that you can seek out for your students.
Sure. We, I guess the best way would be to just kind of describe what I'm fresh off of, and that would be my whole semester. And this kind of ties together maybe a number of the things that we were chatting about. So I have kind of two main concerts, a mid-semester and an end-of-semester concert. And I think most folks, it's kind of the programs that I plan my year around, the programs that are kind of on the books, the year starts. And then there's all of the opportunities that kind of pop up once the school year starts. And I am just kind of voracious about trying to accept those opportunities. I absolutely couldn't. I have too many opportunities to have the students out perform, and I know the value for them of the experience, how important that it is, but certainly also as an advocate, that ability to keep a profile for your program. So I've made a pretty active YouTube page, GCC Guitar, for the better part of the last 8 years, and we do our best to kind of add new content there every semester. So we had a great concert in October that was pretty special for me because I was able to bring in a former student, an alumnus from my school, now a really active performer, composer, and very successful teacher in Mexicali, Mexico, Munoz. So we did something that I do a lot of, and that is we built a program with a single composer. He was our guest performer. So this is another kind of common template for a good concert, if you will. I'll bring in a guest who is either going to interact, perform with the ensemble, or conduct the ensemble, or play with the ensemble, or maybe three of those things, and then do kind of a mid-year or a earlier concert, lightens a little bit of the load on the students for kind of the early programming into a year. Offers an opportunity to work with a professional. In this case, Francisco performed with the students. He coached the students for a couple of days, and he wrote original music concert that they performed. So it was a music, essentially all concert featuring all of his music. Bonding experience that goes on when you have an artist working closely with the kind of level of excitement and the level of a focus that gets generated. Kind of the mystery of the stranger coming in and then what's the experience going to be like, and the relief of, oh, this person's really cool, this is great, they're treating me as an equal. It's been just some of the best experiences that I've had have been in those kind of artist intensive interviews. And then our December concert really was a bit of a tribute to guitar curriculum, if I may. We had a nice little program of some of the pieces that Chris Lee has arranged for guitar curriculum. Beethoven canon, a Mendelssohn Venetian boat song, and also a Schubert canon. We did a set of pieces that I was kind of turned on to when I came out in August. The Yellows and Lost Maples and his Prelude and Allegro. And then we dove headfirst into Joe Williams' From Ancient Voices. A really cool piece that a couple of years back, variations in fugue on Hanukkah Kwisi Queenin, where we had to learn essentially how to phonetically pronounce a bit of an ancient language, and then much to my students' surprise, they hadn't seen that one coming on the cylinder choir at the end of the piece. So we had to learn to sing and be brave enough to after several minutes of music.
Joe Williams recently has kind of rearranged that for our youth ensemble here, the Austin Classical Guitar Youth Orchestra. So I'll have to maybe share that.
It is the coolest piece, and it has such great context. The audio was really for the audience, giving them not only background on the piece, but one of the great things about working with composers like Joe is they'll send you a little message before the performance. So Joe sent a nice little message for the performers, and I read it to the audience as well. And it's all those little touches, those connections that you make that really make the difference. So, I think in taking a concert and turning it into an experience. Yeah. So on one of the other big experiences on concert, our culminating end of semester concert always showcases my large orchestra, but also our small ensembles. The small ensembles are chamber music style, no conductor. The students themselves often are in charge of the programming. Some of my students in a trio found some great music I hadn't been familiar with by Guy Bergeron. We also had some classic Mario Castillo Tedesco Prelude and Fugues for 2 guitars, and one of my guitar quartets played a relevant work by the ever popular Mark Horton, his acoustic counterpoint. And then our Camerata, which is a 9-person chamber ensemble, did what for us was a monumental feat. We did the 18-minute plus Symphony No. 2 by Jörg Kindl, a transmission. Which was a pretty substantial work for us. It's literally a straight run through 18 minutes. So that was kind of this semester, filled up with great visits from guest artists. I had Colin Davin out, and that was associated through some presentations with the other folks that I stay connected with here in town. In this case, our ASU, or Arizona State University guitar program, because in addition to the guitar societies, I do a lot of interactive work with our other universities here in Arizona. We just the same team, so we collaborate and coordinate on a lot of events.
Nice. I think when you were talking there, I was just reminded of having all these great opportunities and awesome performances. And I remember one of the teachers I work with at high school, does some really cool stuff. Like they'll work with their theater department or their English class to do a collaborative event. So you're connecting with other things going on and helping other teachers make a really cool experience, not just a concert. And then a piece of that, back to our kind of who's your audience thing, is she made sure to invite her vice principal and her principal, mm-hmm. and they came, and that was the first time they actually had heard the class. And so until that point, they didn't really know what's going on down there in that music wing, and then seeing that cool collaboration where you've got your English teacher and your arts teacher and all these other really coming together to do, an authentic project-based thing. We're making something, we're connecting all these, different parts of our learning, and being really creative and, student-centered learning and having, students really engaged in decision-making, like they're helping, create the stories or make the sets. I have concert experiences with large dragons being flown in from the fly. Interesting, ones. But I think that idea of like thinking out of the box and doing cool rep and collaborating with composers. I mean, cool thing about the guitar community is, I mean, I commissioned a piece by Jörg also last year, and so you can kind of call them up and do a cool collaboration with that, and it's not, you know, so far removed from the possibilities that a high school couldn't collaborate with, you know, pretty big names in the guitar community. You know, we've got a little bit of time here, but I wanted to catch on a couple of things. You know, we talked about some of who's our audience for advocating guitar programming. We've got parents, we've got obviously students and recruitment, we've got administrators, we've got our community, and, you know, people coming to our performances. I think one thing that would be really kind of cool to talk about is the way in which we communicate. And we talked about, you know, earlier I said, you know, our kind of mantra is to deal with inspiration over information and over, you know, just kind of technical details or the what of what we're doing, but really talk about like the why we're here, why we're coming together tonight to share that experience. And I think one of the really powerful ways to do that is to just always check when you're communicating with someone is how much we're doing storytelling. You know, are we telling a story or are we giving a laundry list to someone? And it's really easy to slip into that because we know so much. We've got all these cool things and, you know, numbers and examples and evidence and portfolios and, you know, assessments and things that we deal with in school. But it's really important to speak to people's hearts and to speak to the why that we should be concerned about coming to that concert when we don't really have to. I mean, oh, it's got to drive across town and deal with traffic. Why are we here together? And I think Jeremy has a lot to say about that.
Yeah,
but,
well,
yeah.
Well, I think you're always often surprised at what actually is a compelling story. Sometimes especially when we're preoccupied with all the things we have to do with the kids, we forget that, like, you know, these are all sometimes 20, 30 individuals that are, you know, united by one thing, and that alone is a story to tell. And people need to hear that story, especially, you know, folks in your community around that surround that program. But I think, you know, just ideas where if we've had students that have stayed in school because of the guitar class, like because they want to show up to be at that class, so they come to school, you know, finding a way just to, you know, very briefly but still eloquently tell that story has a lot of impact. And one of the stories right now that we have with Gardner Bett's kids in juvenile justice, we have a kid that we interviewed that told us, you know, his mom had no idea that he was even learning the guitar until he just randomly invited her to come see a performance that we did in the courtroom, and she was just so taken aback by that. And really, it was a matter of kind of framing that story around a couple paragraphs, and then we sent it out to you know, administrators. We sent it out to folks in our community, and the return on that and was immense. But there's probably, I would say, every program is going to have some sort of really compelling story that happens, you know, at least every semester that you can share. That's not just like, oh, we had this amazing performance on this day, but that you can actually kind of paint the picture of the change that you're making within your classroom for individual kids and things like that. And that's what people really want to hear. And that's really a big why of why we're doing this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what that highlights, Jeremy, is really the transformative power of music, you know, and ultimately what that can do to really to lives. And I know sometimes that maybe sounds awfully big, and a lot of us that you know, there's so many ways that and so many reasons people fall in love with music or find themselves to music. For me, it was kind of, when I was a child, a bit of escapism. I just loved my guitar and kind of being with my guitar in my bedroom. It was only later that it became kind of a social vehicle for me. But I I absolutely, have had the joy in my career of watching discovering a talent that someone didn't know they had, or developing, drive and motivation. And folks, literally, it's not an exaggeration to say, transforming into maybe someone who was very insulated and shy, now being very, very proud and outgoing, and through performance and the craft of mastering an instrument, the discipline of preparing research, and kind of the intensity of performing on stage, literally hold their chests out and carry themselves differently in the world. And absolutely, those are the great stories. Performances are awesome. Performances are very easy for us to showcase and display, but all the good stuff happens in the grind. It's really the experience, right? That's up to the performance, or the experience that's happening day to day in the classroom that truly does transcribe.
Yeah, I think the difficulty in kind of sharing that with people, though, is because you as the teacher are part of that grind as it's happening, and it's just hard to step back and really look at the progress that just not in there, not necessarily the progress in musical development, but in the character development of the kids around you.
I mean, I think you mentioned the importance of being able to step back or rely on our family and loved ones and friends to also help in that. It's like, hey, help contextualize and frame this, because I'm in it too much. Yeah. And times you think, oh, I don't want to be over, but I think Chuck is a great storyteller. I know about his stuff because I see the videos on social media, and I see him on different, we're in similar newsletters and see stuff through NAFME and stuff. And hopefully you've seen some of our stuff. So just being really proactive in sharing with the widest net we can cast is really important for our own program advocacy, but for larger. And actually, Chuck, we got a few minutes. I know you're involved with National Association for Music Education and a bunch of different panels on these bigger things. Is there something that you'd like to share, or make sure that other guitar educators and directors are aware of in that larger context?
Sure. No, and really that ties into advocacy and ties into this idea of network. But I really made it a mission to have some voice at the table and be listening to as many important conversations as possible. So I've been involved now for several years on two boards of our guitar societies here in Arizona. So at the local level, certainly that help keeps me involved with what's going on with our presenter organization partners. I've recently joined in Arizona, our Arizona Music Educator Association's board as the innovations chair. That has allowed me literally now a voice at the table in our state music education chapter. I'm learning an awful lot, and it's nice to kind of have the perspective of someone coming from the guitar classroom at our state level. For I guess 2 years now, I've served the National Association for Music Education's Innovations Council, and my work through NAFME, and really just my kind of journey with NAFME, going to conferences and taking part in professional development, is probably the greatest thing I would recommend to people, is to reach out to organizations, outside of their own individual specialty. In this case, a wider net with the National Association for Med. There's a huge amount of professional development resources there. There's a huge network. I sent a couple of links to you, Eric, that are kind of in the realm of the Civic Etching Field Guide from NAFME, and then there's also another link that I shared, the Music Achievement Council, the resources for music educators, both to kind of arm folks with information, to have that elevator conversation, that quick 5-minute conversation, to be our information, if you will. But I've learned an awful lot from being involved with music educators outside of my own discipline and outside of my own area, and I can't recommend to just get involved with your state music education associations, and then through that with NAFME.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of comments come in, questions, and one of them was I think precision. So maybe a more classroom technique question, and then I know I had one about teacher preparation and certification, and I don't think we have time to really get into either of those, but I think those are good starting points for the next conversation, maybe next month in 2019. But yeah, I just want to thank, Chuck, for you for chiming in.
Yeah,
You're an awesome inspiration to hear from and to be part of this conversation. I hope to meet you somewhere out in the US, at some conference, we run into each other again. And thank you for being here. And we're going to definitely keep engaging people and outreach into all of our little hot spots of guitar and try to get everyone sharing.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure time with you.
Thank you. And Jeremy, anything?
No, I think, it's always interesting how these conversations play out. There's always more things to learn. I feel like I've definitely got some more perspective on some of these topics. But yeah, I think we still have some questions to answer. So I think we'll be doing more of these for sure. And I think those of you that have do have a burning question, you don't have to wait just for these things to get them answered too. Like, you can reach out to any of us. It's either, one of our first names, either Eric or Jeremy, and it's at austinclassicalguitar.org. We're always happy to get on email with you or get on the phone with you and talk with you about these things, because we do it every day and we love it. So
great conversation, you guys.
Thanks so much. And so we'll see folks maybe in 2019, try to jump on some more in the classroom detailed conversations. I know the certification is a big one, and then just kind of classroom technique, conducting, lesson planning, things like that. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you folks another time.
Take care.